Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. As usual, as you guys are getting settled and logging in, if you can please rename yourself to have your name and your organization and your Zoom name, that would be amazingly helpful. And with that, I believe we have at least a majority of task force members, and we've got a busy day today, so we're going to go ahead and dive in. Crystal, am I okay to share? Great. Okay. Hi, for everyone who just joined. Thanks for being here. Really nice to see you guys again. We're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll just ask that as we kick it off, please update your Zoom name to include your name and your organization. Okay, so welcome everyone to our 12th and final meeting of the BPS task force. We're really excited to wrap up this process with you guys today, and we'll have a busy meeting ahead of us. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. Our agenda for the day is pretty straightforward. We'll go through some housekeeping stuff at the beginning. We'll review why we're revoting on everything and how that revote process is going to look throughout the meeting. And then we'll spend most of our time reviewing and finalizing and voting on all of our BPS recommendations. And we'll save about 10 minutes at the end for the CEO to talk about next steps and where we're going to go from here. Sound good? Any questions on the agenda? Okay, awesome. So the reason we're going to be revoting on all our recommendations today, based on all of the wonderful feedback you guys gave us in our first round of review, we have updated now almost all, if not all, of the BPS recommendations based on feedback. And so because the wording in all of these recommendations has changed, we need to revote on all of them to make sure that we still have a 2/3 consensus to continue to keep those recommendations in our final recommendation document. So today we are going to go through all of them. That includes our guiding principles all the way through each recommendation in the for the BPS itself and the recommendations we had around programs for compliance, equity, and workforce. So there are 24 total pieces that we'll be voting on today. And that means with the time we have for this meeting, we're going to try to keep each recommendation time slotted for about 5 minutes. And some will take less, some might take more than that, but that 5-minute average is really what we're going to try and hold to. And so that means as we go through the process today, we're really going to ask that you guys stay on top of it with saying your feedback in a headline, keeping it brief, keeping it to the point so we make sure we can get through everything. So our procedure for the day, we will put up on the slide the recommendation in its final version, in its final form, and I'll read the recommendation out loud. And then we'll have a vote. So we'll vote, do we like this statement as is, or does anybody have any suggested changes? If you like the statement as is, once we vote, if 2/3 consensus is reached, and I should have started by saying we are defining 2/3 consensus in this meeting as 2/3 of the full task force. So there are task force members that might not be present at today's meeting. 2/3 consensus of our full task force is 11 yes votes. So that's the threshold we're going to be looking for as we vote on each proposal. So we'll conduct the vote. If we reach 11 members in support, we will move on to the next one. There will not be an opportunity to lobby and vote. 2/3 members agree, it's going to be added. If we have less than a 2/3 vote, we'll continue on with a lobby and vote process. And I've shared this in the past, but we'll reiterate how that's going to work. For every person who voted no, they will have 30 seconds to lobby the group on what they want to change. And that is the most important thing to say in your 30 seconds is how you want that recommendation to change. We will be pretty strict about cutting folks off at the 30-second mark just because we have so much to get through. So apologize in advance. We are then going to have a vote on each suggested change that is brought up. So someone will lobby for 30 seconds. We'll vote on whether we want to include that suggested change in the recommendation. Then we'll go to another lobby, another vote, another lobby, another vote, etc. If for all suggested changes, we need 2/3 consensus to move that into the final recommendation language. And then at the end of all of the changes, we'll have a final vote on that recommendation to include it. And we'll need to reach 2/3 consensus at that point. So that was a lot. Just curious if folks have questions before we dive in. Check the chat, make sure there's nothing. Yeah, Stacy.
Yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to double check. So basically, we're going to vote on the wording as it is, but the rest of the document, it is what it is, and no other changes are going to be made, no other edits, or can you clarify that piece? And then I should know this, but just remind me, when we finish this meeting today, and we believe that it's a final document, where does this document go and who sees it?
Yeah, great question. So to your second question, we're going to answer at the end. The CEO will have a little wrap up where we'll talk about where this document goes, who's going to see it, all of that stuff. To your first question, the changes, the sort of the bulk of the text outside of the recommendations will likely not change. If there are any final copy edits that will be made to those sections, it will be from the CEO team. What we'll be voting on today is just those pieces that are in italics that are the recommendations that you see throughout the document.
That being said, your comments, your and all of the other task force members' comments on the rest of the document were integrated as we revised it. So, so please know that.
Yeah. Thanks, Julia. Katrina.
Yeah, so just to clarify, there won't be any discussion before the first vote. You'll just pull it up, or would there be opportunity, or can we put things in the chat? Because I know I would value if there's something that other task force members have on their mind to hear that before I'm asked to vote on a statement.
So with our tight timeline, and Crystal, please hop in here if you have other thoughts. But with our tight timeline and needing to get through all of the votes, we're really going to be limiting discussion today. I think if there is something that folks want to share in the chat as we're giving you guys that time to read the recommendations, hopefully you all have had time to review, please drop those in. But unfortunately, we're really going to need to limit that discussion time. This is really an opportunity to bring everyone. This meeting is really to get that final sign off on what we're going to be submitting to the AQCC. And Crystal, do you want to add or change anything that I just said?
Nothing to add. I think you said it very eloquently. We'll just have that first vote. If we hit 2/3 majority, we move on. If there are any comments that you would like captured in these meeting notes or any statements you'd like to say, please put them in the chat. And likewise, as the lobbying vote is happening as well, the lobbying vote needs to happen so that we can get the 2/3 approval to change these recommendations. But again, if there's any comments or statements you'd like to have, please put that in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. And thanks everyone for being so understanding with our tight schedule today. Okay. So with that, if there are no other questions, I think we'll go ahead and we'll dive in. So our first set of votes for the day will be on our guiding principles. So the first set of guiding principles is on equity. And again, I'll just read these out loud and then we'll host a vote. Provide pathways to reach the BPS targets that include options, not a one-size-fits-all approach. Reduce energy burden, i.e. the proportion of a building occupant's monthly income that is spent on utility bills, and enhance the co-benefits accrued to all parties through the BPS, which means improved health and safety, improved indoor air quality, etc. And then ensure benefits are distributed to both residential and commercial owners and tenants of covered buildings, regardless of building size. Ensure all building owner types benefit from reduced energy burden. Okay, and with that, Crystal is going to launch a poll. We'll keep this up here so you guys have a chance to read it.
And Claire, if you can just let me know how many people we have attending right now in attendance.
We have 15 voting members, it looks like, and then an iPhone that I believe belongs to Kara.
Crystal, I'm
Okay.
not sure that I'm supposed to, but I'm getting a request to vote. Looks
No
like.
one
So-
from the facilitation team will need to vote. We just need only the task force members. As of right now, I have 14, but it seems like we have 16 people on the call. If anyone is having the issue voting, please let us know. I see 2 people are joining us via phone, so we still only have 14 votes. Okay. Well, I'm going to end the poll. We have 14 people voting to support, so we have reached majority. We will follow up with anyone who was not able to vote right now to capture the votes as well.
All right, great. And thank you, Stacy, for sharing that additional thought in the chat. We'll absolutely capture those thoughts as we continue on. Katrina, yes, I just pulled up the recommendations doc, so I will try to share what page they're on as we go through to make it easy to follow along. Okay, moving on to our next guiding principle, workforce principles. So these state to work with local education infrastructure and partner entities, i.e. community colleges, school districts, apprenticeship programs, trade organizations and unions, and employers to develop and facilitate vocational training programs. Ensure training is available for installers, building operators, and technicians, and ensure the training is both accessible and practical with real-world tools that can be used to provide insight into opportunity pros and cons. Support a just transition by conducting education and outreach programs that promote opportunities for existing and new workforce to ensure that they're aware of the upcoming changes, are prepared for the transition to a lower carbon economy, and can transfer skills into quality positions. And then finally, ensure business owners and workforce members, particularly those that are underserved, young, people of color, or low income, receive equitable access to education, training resources, and job opportunities. And for anyone following along in our final PDF recommendations doc, we are on page 8 with those bullets listed. All right, and we'll give everyone a moment, and thanks, Crystal, for launching the poll.
So apparently we have 2 task force members on here twice. So the final count of task force members right now is 14. But we've reached 14 out of 14 and we've gotten 2/3 majority approval.
Okay, fantastic. So again, another 100% approval. Thank you everyone for that vote. All right, moving on to our third guiding principle of the day, or section of guiding principles, engaged and informed community principles. Okay, so these bullets read, engage a wide audience in the BPS topics to connect buildings, climate, health, and equity using inclusive messaging in multiple languages. Create sector-specific communications that are accessible to different audiences and meet people where they are, ensuring that recommendations and requirements are easily understood by all. Develop strategic partnerships, including coordinating with the design community to ensure that the BPS strategies are implemented. Begin outreach early, provide multiple opportunities for feedback, and make use of existing communications channels. And this is on page 9 of our PDF recommendations document.
Okay, Lotus team is telling me we only have a total of 13 people. Now it went up to 14. So ending that poll, but we reached 2/3 majority. Again, we'll follow up with any task force members that are missing.
Okay, awesome. So another 100% vote from the task force. Thank you all. All right, moving on to reliability principles. So these bullets read, consider how BPS requirements could affect grid reliability. Ensure the BPS requirements do not compromise building reliability, maintainability. Wow, I'm sorry, that was just a word I wasn't ready for, or longevity. Consider demand flexibility, both at the building and grid level. Develop whole system solutions that avoid unintended consequences and include a role for renewable energy. And we are on page 9 still of the PDF document. Okay, and I think that's 14, Crystal. Wonderful. And we got another full approval vote, so thank you all. All right. Wow, we're flying through these. Okay, cost principles up next. So these bullets read, consider and promote all financing options, including the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing Program, or CPACE, utility incentives and funding from state programs and other sources. Provide flexibility within the options for compliance, allowing building owners to decide the best path for reaching compliance in their building or buildings. Encourage the state to offer resources and incentives for compliance, including for building performance systems, high efficiency appliances, and beneficial electrification. And support compliance in ways that illustrate the cost of inaction and advance the business case for improvements. And this is on page 9, continued page 9 in the PDF for reference. All right. And thanks everyone who's dropping comments in the chat. Really appreciate this additional feedback. And we did get 100% vote on the cost principles. So I think we will continue to move on to our streamlined process principles. So these bullets read, ensure that building owners, building operators, and or tenants are able to take action to meet building requirements and performance targets. Minimize the administrative burden to building owners for documenting compliance. Focus on lower performing buildings and promote high performing buildings. Coordinate and collaborate with local programs to avoid duplicative compliance and reporting requirements. Include flexibility with interim periods while encouraging progress towards the 2030 deadline. And facilitate implementation of the law without adding requirements of building owners beyond those outlined in the law to the extent practical. And again, these are on page 9 of our PDF. All righty. Well, we have another 100% vote. So thank you all for voting and for your attention as we got through the guiding principles. Wonderful. So we're going to move on now to voting on our BPS metric recommendations. And for those following along in the PDF, this is on the bottom half of page 10, where these recommendations start.
Hey, Kim, really quick, I want to flag that Katrina had a question in the chat regarding whether we're going to vote on the high-level items in the executive summary.
Oh, thanks, Katrina. I'm sorry I missed that question. We do not have a plan to vote on those elements today. Crystal, is there an opportunity, or should folks share in the chat if they have any suggested changes or thoughts on those pieces?
People can share in the chat if there's any suggested changes on the executive summary part. I will say for the executive summary and the introduction, what we tried to do was summarize what the recommendations were. So once these recommendations are finalized and voted on, we will go back and review the introduction and executive summary to make sure those italicized bullets or points reflect the current and up-to-date recommendations.
Crystal, may I hop in here for a
Yes.
moment? This is Keith Hay at the Energy Office. I think that we've heard a couple of times now from task force members a desire to provide a perhaps broader level of feedback. So I know you and I have not talked through this, but I think we are open to taking a document back from any of the task force members with recommendations on potential changes to language outside of the recommendations. Those need to be done today, consistent with what the Lotus team and Crystal have shared. We're happy to take that feedback from you. We will do our best to look at it. We will think about incorporation of broader sets of comments in the non-recommendation language in the document. I'd like you all to recognize that there's a pretty tight turnaround to get this document back out with the statutory deadline. So for those of you who would like to provide, feedback, please do. And you can send it to Crystal and to me, and we will take a look at it as we think about any final changes that need to be made.
Okay, thank you, Keith, and thank you, Crystal. And Christine, I see your message in the chat there. So I guess if there's anything you would like to share, can we keep it under 30 seconds, or maybe even tighter than that, before we go to vote here?
The energy efficiency compliance path of the BPS should use weather normalized site-specific EUI, but not the entire BPS, because site-specific EUI is not the right metric for showing 80% electrification. It's just not the right fit for that. It just doesn't even compute. It does lead to increased improved EUI, but it wouldn't show meeting the site EUI. It's just not the right metric for that. I saw it as two primary paths: energy efficiency as one, which you demonstrate through site EUI, and the other is 80% electrification, which you do not demonstrate through site EUI. So that was my issue with this. And then a second one is that Energy Star Portfolio Manager does not normalize for occupancy right now. So if we recommend that, it's not even possible in the benchmarking tool. So that would have to say something like when available in the benchmarking tool.
Okay, thank you, Christine. And Katrina, I know we kind of are going against our rules. So do you want to share your comment in the chat quickly in under 30 seconds, please?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I was raising that high level section, but I think this is a place where it's important this task force explicitly say that this whole thing, the EUI targets, the alternate compliance options must be set such that the whole thing as a whole sector meets the greenhouse gas reductions required. Nowhere in does the task force recommendations do we actually say that all of this must be done such that we meet the greenhouse gas reductions required. It gets implied. I think it needs to actually be said. And this is one key place to say it. That is one of the big reasons why I would like us to have voted on those high level sections also, because it's missing from the executive summary that this whole thing must have targets set to meet the greenhouse gas reductions.
Kim, I'm going to jump in here. Just to stick to protocol, let's do a general vote on number 7, and then we'll do the lobbying vote. We just heard Christine and Katrina. We'll have them try to summarize what they just said to try to incorporate their feedback into the recommendation, but let's stick to protocol and vote first and then do all the lobbying and voting.
Perfect. Okay, with those comments in mind, and knowing that we can lobby and vote to change these pieces based on Katrina and Christine's feedback, we're going to launch the poll, and this poll is just for number 7 on the top half of the screen. The BPS should use weather normalized site-specific EUI as the metric for building owner to report and demonstrate compliance.
Just giving it a few seconds to have all members vote.
And it looks like we're at 14, Crystal. Okay, fantastic. So we did not reach consensus. As you guys can see, we have 10 voted for yes, 4 voted for no. So if you voted no, please raise your hand now, and I will call on you. We will run a timer to be like this, with 30 seconds where you guys will pitch your suggested change, and make sure, again, you are being very explicit in what you would like to change. And what we'll do then after we've heard each suggested change is host another vote and whether we're going to incorporate it or not. For task force members listening to this, if you have feedback or want to respond to a task force member sharing thoughts during their 30 seconds, please drop that in the chat. We do not, again, have time for discussion today. So, okay, I will start with Karen.
Kim?
You're at the top of my screen. Yep.
Kim, hold on. Let's start with Christine and Katrina because they've already spoken. So if Christine and Katrina, I apologize, but if you could repeat what you said and just kind of summarize what you would like to see changed within that 30-second window, then we can try to incorporate and vote on each of those changes.
Okay, Christine, we'll start with you.
I
And-
would like if it could say the energy efficiency compliance path of the BPS should use, and the rest would stay the same.
Okay.
And if anyone wants me to explain that, or is that clear? I don't think the metric for site UI should be used for showing 80% compliance, only for showing the site, the energy efficiency.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Christine. And so we will vote, and I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong here. Oh, I'm just figuring out our tech. Julie, are you tracking these in a slide, another slide?
Yes, I duplicated it, so you might need to refresh the slideshow. It's the next slide now. It's the live edited one.
Okay, so we're going to vote on these changes, and we're just doing this visually so you guys can see, and we'll vote on these one at a time. So we're going to thank you, Christine, for your comment and your thoughts. We're going to vote on the recommended change it to with what Christine just suggested. So if Crystal could launch the Zoom poll.
And Joel threw a question in the chat. Christine, I don't know if you might be able to address that. Asking, wouldn't site UI work for BE if a reduction in natural gas B2 is shown in the numerator? And maybe you could answer it in the chat, would be great.
Well, we know that site UI would be improved through beneficial electrification, but we don't know if it would be improved enough to hit their property type specific site UI target. And yet we still wanted to encourage a movement towards electrification, even if it didn't hit that specific number.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks, Joel, for that question.
I'm going to close the poll. We have 14 votes. I will flag we have 15 task force members on the call. So just a reminder to please be paying attention to these recommendations, and when the polls come up, we will follow up with you after this if you have not voted, but please try to vote during this call. We did not reach majority. We had 10 out of 14 that voted in support of that.
Okay. So that in following our process, that means we're going to go back to our original here and move on to the next lobby and vote person. And again, all of these notes are logged and will be recorded for after the meeting. Kara and Karen, I think I both saw both of your hands up.
Well, you had asked us to raise our hand if we voted no on the last one, which I did. So, but I was just, I don't have any other comments to add. I was just a no vote on the original vote.
And I thought I was up next.
Oh, I'm sorry, Katrina. Yeah, thank you. Your hand, yeah, please go next. And I will start your timer. Yeah, feel free to go for it. I'll get the timer started. Thanks.
I put text in the chat, so I won't take longer than that, except that I think as the task force, we need to clearly state that this all needs to be designed to meet the greenhouse gas reductions required in the legislation.
Okay, thank you. Short and sweet. Appreciate it. Julia, she's just letting her finish up typing up that change. Julia, let me know when you're ready, and we will host the vote again on recommendation number 7.
I believe that should be reflective of Katrina's edits.
Okay, fantastic. Crystal, if you can launch the poll.
Are we voting on
I'm
7 or 8?
7.
I'm confused about the process because I like this change, so I want to vote yes. But if we vote yes, then we would move on and not be able to hear anybody else's suggestion for why they voted no.
No. So every person who voted no will have an opportunity to make a suggestion, and we'll just incorporate them one by one as we go through.
Oh, then I'd like to change mine.
Okay. Crystal, do you mind relaunching the vote just to I'm sorry for everyone that wasn't clear.
Yes, I'll need to recreate this so that we can rewrite these votes.
Okay. Give us one quick moment. So while she's fixing up that poll, so apologies. I know it's a bit of a complicated process, but for everyone who votes no, we will give everybody who voted no and wants to lobby for a change 30 seconds. After each lobbied change, we will vote on whether it gets included. If it is voted in to the recommendation, that will be our new baseline. And we'll have folks continue to lobby for changes that they wanted to see. We'll continue to integrate them as they're voted in, and then we will do a 2/3 vote on the final statement at the end. Okay, and the revote is live. So thank you for that clarifying question, Christine. And we're still waiting on 2 task force members. Okay, that is 15 votes. So that recommendation, thank you, Katrina, will be included in our final statement. So we'll stop sharing. And Kara, I believe I will, do you have a lobby and vote or to share with the group?
I don't know what it is that I have, but I have a thought. That's
Here we go.
appreciate this, and I appreciate Christine's feedback, and I like the direction this is going. It feels like we're converging on, or we're kind of reiterating that there's 2 primary compliance metrics. One is EUI specific, and the other is electrification. And that was something I'd flagged in the text, is we just need to be clear that those are parallel operating together. It's not just EUI. So I think we might need another recommendation to reflect that around the EUI part.
Okay. Thank you, Kara. Sorry, let me get this to stop chirping at you.
And can I just say, sorry, that's reflective in the graphic that you have, which I love, and it's great. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks. So Julie, I'm not sure if I'm seeing you make any changes to this newer version.
I have not yet. I'm happy to, and I guess I'm wondering what those edits look like since the task force voted down the suggested change from Christine on specifying that this is the energy efficiency compliance metric. Do we want to add that back in and then add a sentence that says that speaks to that electrification being also a compliance pathway?
Katrina, do you have a thought on that? No. Okay. I would say, I think, yes, I think that is what I heard from Kara. So we would change this first recommendation to include energy efficiency for that compliance pathway, and then add a second statement saying that there is sort of around compliance for electrification and how it is different. And thank you to the task force and your patience as we just make sure that we are dialing this in accurately for everybody. No pressure, Julia. As we all watch you type. While she's typing that out.
Is there a, oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
go for it.
Is there a specific way that folks would like this next sentence to be worded? An alternative compliance pathway will utilize.
Christine?
Yeah,
Sorry, this is
you're muted.
You're muted.
This is Keith. I have a question for the members of the task force because I apologize if I've either been obtuse or not paying nearly enough attention over the last several months of the work that we have been doing together. I had understood based on the votes taken to this point and the work that we had done that there was a metric and compliance pathways. And based on the feedback that I've heard today from, I think, Katrina, potentially Kara and Christine, that's no longer the case. There are actually two different metrics. There is an efficiency metric and an electrification metric, and site EUI is a compliance pathway under the efficiency metric, which is a completely different version of what we've been doing than I've understood the work to date. So it may be a moment to take a strategic pause, and I'm going to ask for clarification if I've misunderstood, because I don't think the document as written reflects that approach. And if it is a recommendation of certain members of the task force to take that approach, then I think we may need to pause and present you with something different, because that's not what you have before you. So I would ask everybody other than perhaps Katrina, Christine Brinker, and Kara, who have all, in my view, voiced the opinion that that's the approach we've taken. I think we need the other members of the task force to weigh in here if I'm misunderstanding what we were supposed to be presenting to you.
And also, Lotus team, I may ask you to bring up either the new or the old compliance chart just to help us structure this conversation and help us keep track of what we're saying here.
Absolutely. And so I just will read Joel's thought out from the chat. My vote for site EUI was under the impression that this metric most incentivized electrification. Thanks, Joel. So are there any other task force members that would like to weigh in here? Keith, if not, perhaps we could toss it back to Kara and Christine or Katrina to
Well, I'm pretty clear. I'm unless I'm misunderstanding their view, I think I understand what their suggestions are. I'd really like to hear from the other task force members if there's broad agreement with the way it's being presented or not. I mean, that seems to be a fundamental split that we need to resolve before we move forward with discrete votes on the 24 additional recommendations.
Kathy, I see your hand. Thank you.
Sorry, my video isn't working on my brand new computer. My understanding was that the electrification part was an alternate pathway, not that it wasn't EUI and electrification, but it was an or a combination. You could do a combination or you could do one or the other, but not necessarily a requirement for both. So I think I might also be confused, Keith.
Yeah.
Keith and Lotus, you can probably help me clarify this, but I just want to clarify based on our previous conversations and this little chart here. If a building owner chose 80% electrification of their energy consumption, if they had done 80%, they would have met their target. They did not need to do anything else with their site UI target. They would have just met it. Energy efficiency was a different action where they just took energy conservation measures and would have to use site UI to see if they're getting close to that target. And then they could use site UI to track their progress on the alternative compliance pathways with the note that the AQCC could consider adding another metric into this. Is that clear, or is that not what the task force was intending?
Well, folks, think about that. Thank you, Crystal, for that added piece. Stacy, I'll move it on to you to hear your thoughts on this, how you're interpreting these.
I don't believe we have a fundamental shift or difference necessarily. However, I just thought Christine brought up a really good point that just the way that it was worded and written, that site EUI wouldn't in fact be the measurement, and necessarily the appropriate measurement for a percentage of electrification. So I guess I felt there was just a little more nuance needed in the wording, and not necessarily that the task force has this fundamental split around language. But I'll stop there. I'm equally confused about where we're actually at in the conversation. Good luck.
Thank you, Stacy. And so what I think I'm hearing is that the task force sees electrification and implementing efficiency measures as the two primary compliance pathways. One will be shown by meeting a site UI target. The other will be shown by meeting an 80% electrification of load. And I'm seeing some head nods. Is that generally, is there anyone who does not have that same understanding?
Can you repeat that?
Yes. So there are two primary compliance pathways. One is implementing efficiency measures to meet a site EUI target that's given to your property. The second primary compliance option is to electrify 80% of your building's energy load. So one, and now I'm seeing shakes but that electrification piece, I think, you do not need to meet your property site EUI target. You just have to electrify, is I think how at least I've been interpreting this from the beginning, and I'm seeing now that there was someone shaking their head on that, that is not how we were thinking of it. And Katrina, thank you for clarifying 80% of space and water heating load. That was my misspeak there. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, if anybody does not agree that those are our two primary compliance pathways and saw those interacting differently, can you please raise your hand or share in the chat? Seems like most folks dropping their thoughts in the chat seem to agree. Okay. Keith, do you feel okay that we are in a good place where most of the task force, I think the task force is on the same page here?
I think that's right, but then we have an issue with the vote we are taking around whether or not there is a metric. There's not. As I understand what this conversation just was, there's essentially two metrics, one related to site EUI for energy efficiency, and the other a demonstration of 80% of electrification of space conditioning and water heating load. And I think that's where I'm getting confused, because I haven't heard all the task force agree that site EUI and is the metric for electrification. The conversation has been that electrification in and of itself is sufficient to demonstrate compliance. And so that's the metric or test. And sorry, Katrina, you've had your hand up for a long time, so perhaps we ought to let you hop in here.
Well, I just had a small item. I noted it in the chat. It was a small typo request
Okay.
about the word specific, but I don't know if we need to vote on small typos like that on these items that are in italics, or if we can send those to you later. Because you'd said everything that might need to change for the recommendations needs to be voiced. So I put it in the chat.
Thank you, Katrina.
I don't think we want to set EUI targets for every single building. So
can Lotus pull up the new version of the compliance pathway slide for a moment?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, this section is we paused here, so.
Yeah, that's where we have
I think it's
paused,
slide 35.
Slide 35. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the chart you're looking for, Keith. My bad.
Yeah.
Yes. Here you go.
So as I understand it, the members of the task force are so far in agreement on the green section. The primary compliance pathways are those two things. We were taking a vote on the primary metric, or sorry, the compliance metric, not even a primary. And I think my confusion rests in that in the course of the conversation on that vote, it did not seem clear to me that there was a metric and that there's a metric under each of the compliance pathways. Under energy efficiency, it would be site EUI property type target, and under electrification, it would be a demonstration of that 80% threshold. That's what I'm trying to get to. I see 2 thumbs up. I see several head scratching, which, you know, that's totally understandable given that it's me speaking instead of somebody that can be more articulate.
Katrina, please keep your hand up because I want to incorporate your edit on number 8. Keith, is it, I know we've done this, but perhaps we do another vote on compliance metric, just with all the conversation we've just had. Either we do that first, or Kara, if you could restate the change you wanted to make. Did you want to change the compliance metric recommendation itself, or did you want to change the pathways and how they're set up? I think those are the 2 conversations going on simultaneously that is confusing people. And so I guess, Kara, if you could restate what you wanted to change with number 7. Julia, if you could show the original one again.
Yeah, thank you. This is really helpful conversation. I know this is complex. I think what I'm taking away from this is that the green is right. And I think we need, to what Keith was just saying, we just need a compliance metric for each of those compliance pathways. And so maybe it gets broken out separately. And so the electrification compliance metric is actually based on the electrification, 80% of load. The energy efficiency compliance metric is based on site EUI and property type targets. So maybe the purple just gets smooshed below. I know it screws up your structure.
I see.
So essentially, we'll touch on secondary in the future because I don't want to confuse people. But electrification, 80% of their water and space heating, as well as partial electrification, then would have a different metric that would not be site UI, essentially.
Correct.
Okay. Lotus, let's create, I know we have 7 to 8 here. Let's create a new number 8. And so, and Keith and Lotus, let me know how you feel about this. We'll have we could possibly combine number 7. I'm kind of editing in my brain right now, of stating that site UI is the metric, with the exception of electrification. That would be a different metric that the air division can decide what that metric would be, unless the task force has an idea that they'd like to vote on.
Yeah. So here's a thought. Crystal, is it possible to give us 5 minutes offline to draft a 7A and B that I think comports with what the task force is looking for, so that we don't have to do this live with 18 people? We can come back to you in like 3 minutes with a 7A and B that you can vote on, and I think meets the needs that you're looking for. I mean, that's ultimately my goal, is to make sure that we are accurately capturing the task force's recommendations. But I think if we have 3 minutes of privacy, we can pull that off. So is the task force comfortable with that?
Keith, we can take a quick break. Let the task force take a break, walk around, and then we can wordsmith this and let them come back.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you, everyone. So we'll call folks back at 1:55, and you'll hear my voice coming out of your screens when we'll circle back and we're ready. So,
everyone stay on the Zoom link. That's all I ask. Keith and Lotus, we can talk offline. I'll message you.
Hey, Crystal. Oh, shit.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for your patience as we worked through that. You guys brought up a really good point. We wanted to make sure we gave it the time that it needed to make sure we could write the language as such that you guys could vote on it today. As Crystal builds out the Zoom poll, I'm going to share my screen again and have you guys read the latest version, the newest version of the compliance metric piece. Now, I wanted to note, actually, I should just wait a moment till everyone's back. If you guys can turn cameras on when you're back, and I'll explain what we did here for clarity's sake. Okay, thanks everyone. Katrina, you'll notice that we moved your recommendation out of this, and we moved it actually to be with recommendation number 8 because it didn't quite fit into the conversation around metric. And so we did not lose that text. We did not lose that everybody voted that in. We just weren't sure that this slide and this recommendation is where it fits. So we moved it to be next to the property type target piece. So we'll show that in a moment. Okay, I'll let everyone take a moment to read. And then Crystal, when you're ready, feel free to launch the Zoom poll.
Kim and Keith, do we need to re-explain the slide just really quickly, 30 seconds, just to make sure everyone's on the same page on what we changed?
Sure. Would you like me to do that?
Sure, your Keith.
So what we changed here is basically we added a statement that the metric for compliance will depend on the compliance pathway. So for site EUI, demonstrating with energy efficiency that they are compliant by using weather normalized site EUI as the metric. For electrification, we added basically a different statement that says demonstrating compliance should show that a building is using, is using highly efficient electric devices to meet 80% of space conditioning and water heating load. And again, I don't think that we need this.
Yes, so that was not discussed, but I do think Katrina put some wording or some suggesting on the chat on what the metric could be for electrification. We're going to do a vote on this. If there's a certain metric that the task force has comments around for electrification, they can put that in the chat. We'll put that in additional considerations. We do not have time to vote on that today, unfortunately. I'm going to launch the poll now.
Okay. Thanks everyone for sticking with us, and thanks for the great thoughts and comments in the chat.
And I guess to the conversation in the chat, can we replace device before we vote? Devices, it has a different connotation to me than like equipment and appliances, what we're actually asking for.
I feel like we've used the word equipment before, so I don't think we need to necessarily vote on that. But Keith, what do you think? I think this was already part of another wording and a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an opinion on that one. I'm happy to go with whatever word.
I'm also happy to we only have 9 task force members present, so we will not reach, apparently only 10 now. So we may not reach majority on this. Okay, more task force members are now voting.
To answer the questions in the chat, I think that piece percent electrified at the end is just indicating that a building should share the percent of their space and heating load, space and water heating load that they did electrify. So showing that it was above the 80th percentile, and we can make sure that language is a bit clearer in the final. So thanks for those questions.
And I know we're waiting on one more person to vote. Karen, it looks like the poll did not come up for her, but she is a yes.
Apologies, I was on mute. Karen, I will follow up with you with a ballot since your vote was not captured, but we've ended the vote and I'm sharing it. So we've reached at least 11 members in support. So we can now move on to the next recommendation, which was number 8 with the property type targets.
Okay. Thank you everyone for working with us through that process. This is, you know, just, it's not easy to get 18 folks all together on the same page here. So we really appreciate your patience. Moving on to our number 8 recommendation. So again, I'll read it and then we will cast a vote. And if you do not agree or you want to add something to this, please vote no. So that way we have that opportunity for lobby and vote if majority disagree. So the recommendation, the BPS should use property type specific site EUI targets, which should be normalized for weather and occupancy. And then the statement that was voted in and we've included here because it aligned much better with this recommendation from Katrina, the EUI targets and alternate compliance options should all be set and designed such that the sector as a whole meets the greenhouse gas reductions required in the legislation. I just want to call attention to Katrina's one comment to remove the word specific. So if you agree that that should be removed, please make sure you're voting no so we can hear those lobby changes. Okay, we're still waiting for 2 more task force votes. So if you didn't get a poll, okay, and there they came in. All right. Thanks everyone. So we did not reach consensus. So we're going to go through the lobby and vote changes again. So for those of you who said no and would like to lobby for a change to this recommendation, please raise your hand and I will call on folks one by one. Awesome. Okay, Katrina, we'll go ahead and start with you and let me pull up my timer really quick. But go ahead and start speaking while I'm
Okay.
that.
If we could just take out the word specific, because that we can't set targets for every individual or specific building. I don't think you want to do that. And also, and occupancy can't be factored into setting targets through our methodology we can think of. It should be factored in and sort of reaching the targets, or it's an adjustment factor in alternate compliance, but it's not how targets are set. So taking out specific, taking out and occupancy.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And thank you. So I will move on here. The new recommendation that we will vote, or the changes, sorry, that Katrina just shared, we'll vote on here. So the new recommendation with those changes included states the BPS should use property type site EUI targets, which should be normalized for weather. So we're going to host a vote on those 2 changes. Crystal, I'll wait for you to launch the poll.
I actually want to ask one quick clarifying question of Katrina. I think I understand what you're getting, but I think the wording was confusing. We're still setting targets for each of the property types, like an office building versus a hospital, but it's not each individual building gets their own target. It's a target set for all office buildings. So you still mean that, right? Just taking out the specific.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then in meeting the targets, it could still be normalized for occupancy. I just don't know how we would factor that in setting the targets.
Okay, I think we have that in the text of the document as well. So, okay, I'll launch the poll now.
Thank you, Crystal. And thank you, task force members who are voting. Okay, that is 15. We'll share the results. We did get 11 votes on that change, and so we will incorporate both of those changes moving forward through the rest of the lobby and vote process. So thank you, Katrina, for sharing those changes. Kathy, I will move to you next.
I think mine is more of a question than a lobbying thing. And I think it's even more so now that we just voted to take out the occupancy recommendation. And that is my concern about how do you handle a building that has a low occupancy level. And on the EUI targets. And so that being sector wide, what happens if we continue to have occupancy issues? Does that mean your EUI targets have to go up in order for the whole sector to meet it? If people are getting EUIs changed because of occupancy levels? So those are more questions than, and if those are specifics that'll come up later, okay, but I'm not really lobbying for anything. I'm just asking for clarification.
Thank you for that, Kathy. If you can summarize that and put that in the chat, we'll summarize that in the meeting notes and put that in the additional consideration section of the document. Were there any more lobbying votes to actually change any of the wording in the proposal? Please keep your hands up. If there's comments or suggestions, please put them in the chat.
Thanks, Crystal. Christine, you.
I think first of all, it should specify the energy efficiency path of the BPS, just like we talked about in the last one. Hopefully that's acceptable since we agreed on it for the last one. Second, I don't think it's the target that is normalized for weather and occupancy. I think it's each individual building site EUI when they're reporting that is normalized for weather and occupancy. It's not the entire sectors that target that gets normalized. And then third, it's important to include occupancy. It's just that it's not possible right now in the benchmarking tool, but we still want to say it's important if and when it is incorporated into the tool. So I would have the whole thing read: the energy efficiency compliance path of the BPS should use property type specific site EUI targets, period. In meeting the targets, site EUI should be normalized for weather, and if and when available in the benchmarking tool, normalized for occupancy.
Okay, thank you, Christine. And thank you for incorporating that all into a nice tight statement. So Julia and Crystal, I'll give you guys a moment to include all of those components.
I will also offer a clarification that I saw come through in the chat. That is a waiver for the benchmarking requirements. If a building was unoccupied for 30 consecutive days during 2021, they did not need to submit any of their data to our benchmarking program. So they would need to submit for the next year, and that would be the year that their targets would be based on. So if a building was completely unoccupied, that is not what we're basing their targets off of. So there does not need to be a concern there, but the AQCC will provide more guidance around that.
Okay, awesome. Just doing a quick check, Julia, are we ready to go on this revised?
Yeah, should be slide 16.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the recommendation you guys can see that I'm sharing right now is the one we will be voting on. This incorporates the changes suggested by Christine. So if you can launch the poll, Crystal, that'd be fantastic.
I also just want to clarify, this vote, is this building off of Katrina's changes or her changes in this wording as well? Or is this a completely separate and then we're combining them?
Katrina's changes should be incorporated. Julie, is that how you did that?
Yes, I believe,
Yes.
Katrina, if you feel like this does not capture or no longer captures the nature of your changes, then obviously let me know. But I think what we've done is just added in basically that once the option for normalization for occupancy is available, that should be utilized.
Okay, I will launch the poll. I just want to clarify.
Okay, we're just still missing one task force member. Okay, so we did reach the 11 votes we needed to include these changes. So thank you, Christine, for your suggested changes. This is our new recommendation language. And then I will just triple check before we move on. Are there any other no votes that wanted an opportunity to lobby and vote, or is the task force feel good? I'm not seeing any hands, so I think with that, we can continue on. So I will go ahead and present this in the presenter view to keep it a little cleaner. And then once we go back into lobby and vote, I will I'll shift back into that editable piece. So now we're going to move into voting on our primary compliance pathways. So the first recommendation we're going to be voting on is for the energy efficiency compliance pathway. That recommendation reads, building owners should reduce the energy consumption of their building through implementation of energy efficiency measures and/or technologies to meet the property type site EUI targets as a primary compliance pathway for the BPS. And this actually, before we vote, Crystal, I do have a question, because that edit that the task force voted on per Katrina's lobby and vote, we kind of have that language throughout the recommendations. And so that will likely change all of these, right? To remove the word specific.
That's totally fine. You can remove that from the slide now. And we'll still need to do the voting process either way. So,
okay, cool. I just wanted to confirm that that's how that was going to work. And I think that makes a ton of sense. So, okay. Building owners should reduce the energy consumption of their building through implementation of energy efficiency measures and/or technologies to meet the property type site EUI targets as a primary compliance pathway for the BPS. And thank you, Crystal, if you don't mind launching the poll.
You guys are on it with this one.
Yeah, 15 out of 15. Okay, wonderful. So there are the results for you guys, and we will move forward with that recommendation as part of our final document. On to the next. Again, this is primary compliance pathways. So the recommendation here is the BPS rules should encourage building owners to replace fossil fuel space and domestic hot water heating equipment with efficient electric technologies. Building owners should earn full compliance with their property type site EUI target if they electrify 80% of their total fossil fuel energy by replacing equipment with high efficiency electric equipment. And again, we will take out, oops, my bad. I'll just take out this specific word here. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Crystal, for launching the poll. If everyone needs another minute to read, take your time.
we're
Right.
still waiting on 2 members to vote.
And one more vote, and then we'll be ready.
I'm going to end the poll.
Crystal, I think we should wait for the 15th member to vote.
Has anyone had trouble voting? Because that was
Bill.
45 seconds we waited. So
I
just
think
wanted to know.
Bill raised his hand. Bill, I'm sorry if I've been having any trouble. Is there anything we can do to help? Did you want to throw a yes or no into the chat for us? That'd be great. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, I thought I voted.
Oh, I'm sorry, not Bill Green. I was looking at Bill Martin on that one.
Okay.
We got 2 Bills here. I did get your vote. Thank you, Bill. Bill Green.
I voted. It's on there.
Okay. Bill, did you vote when the poll popped up at all, or no, you're voting via chat? You're on mute.
Yeah, I voted yes, as is presented here.
But did you
It's in the
vote
chat.
in the poll? Did you vote at all in the poll though?
I did
No?
not vote in the poll. No, it's in the chat.
Okay.
Just clarifying. With that, then we have majority.
Yes.
That would be 11 out of 14. That's why I want to clarify.
Thank you, Bill. Sorry for the confusion, everyone. So that one does pass with majority, and so we will include that in the recommendations. Christine, I'll give you a real quick moment to share your thoughts, but we do need to continue to move on because we're running behind.
This then conflicts with the vote that we took before to take site EUI out of the electrification pathway. So instead of saying you are in full compliance with your property type site specific target, I think it just should say you are in full compliance with the BPS.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Christine. If you can, I see you dropped that in the chat. So we'll, Crystal, do you want to work on that, or Keith afterwards? Because this was accepted by the task force with this vote.
We can change, Julia, if you can change that on the slide now. But I think the task force has already voted on that. So I think that's okay to incorporate.
Okay, great. And Michael, I'll give you another quick 5 to 10 seconds to share your thought question you have.
Yeah, just editorial comment, and I put it in the chat, but I happen to be burdened with the knowledge of going to several buildings downtown that will not be able to use this technology we're describing in here because the 480 amp service isn't in the street. And I know how long it's going to take Excel to file that with the PUC and then come to us and try to tear up the street and build it. And it's going to be years away. And I just don't know if I'm the only person that realizes that it's a long time coming. So I just want to throw that out there. I'm all for the goal. I just happen to be burdened with the knowledge of how long it's going to take before that level of electrical service is available.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Michael.
You're compelled to say that.
I appreciate that. And again, this is not the only pathway. So hopefully building owners will have additional options to meet their target. And Kathy, I'm sorry to cut you off, and I need to just be more diligent because I can be a little softer sometimes. If folks have comments, please drop them in the chat, and we'll make sure we track all of that. And we want to continue on if folks are okay with that, so we get through the rest of our recommendations. So thank you. And I'm just going to say I'm sorry that I am bad at being strict. So, okay. We're going to move on to our secondary compliance pathways. And the first one of those is renewable energy generation. So our recommendation, as worded currently, the BPS rules should consider the appropriate level or amount of renewable energy generation that should count towards compliance, and that any renewable energy should meet the following conditions to receive credit. The building owner retains the renewable energy certificates, or the RECs are retired by the utility on behalf of the customer in the year generated. The renewable energy is located in Colorado, and the credit reflects the changing carbon intensity of Colorado's electrical grid. So I'll give everyone a moment to read, and I have fallen off on my job of telling you guys where we are in the PDF. So give me one moment and I will do that. We are down on page 14 in the recommendations, if you're following along.
Kim, are we ready to launch the poll on this?
Yes, we are.
There are 2 separate recommendations for this and a few others. So just know that these polls are very simple, and it just says renewable energy recommendation number 1. So.
And again, if you would like to suggest a change, please vote no, and we'll go through the lobby and vote process. All right, so that is 15, Crystal, if you want to close and share. So we did not reach consensus, so we'll go through with the lobby and vote. For those of you who would like to lobby a change, please raise your hand, and we'll give you each 30 seconds. Katrina, I believe I saw your hand up first, so we'll start with you.
I put my proposed change in the chat, and may not be one for one. The language on the screen, they probably need to be fit together, but I think this recommendation goes against the task force's principle of being something that is really implementable for building owners. I don't think building owners know if they have RECs for their solar or not. If they're doing solar, they're putting a bunch of effort into doing that. I do think that we need to do proper greenhouse gas accounting. I think the state could do that after the fact. So similar to how I added a statement that this whole thing must be designed to achieve the greenhouse gas reductions of the underlying legislation. Maybe we add that statement here, but don't make the building owner do the REC accounting.
Thanks, Katrina. And I know you're going super quick. Can you just repeat for me that change that you suggested at the end to make sure we captured that correctly?
I think I put the proposed language in the chat.
Oh, okay. Thank
In
you.
quotes, and we may just want to add again that language that the whole thing should be designed to achieve the greenhouse gas reductions in the legislation.
Okay.
I did not. I can put that again in the chat if you want. It was.
Nope,
And
I got
that
it.
was from
I got
our
it.
that was from our previous vote. So okay. Julia, just give me a heads up when that change is made, and I'll scoot onto that slide and we can vote.
I think my text might actually just replace bullets 1 and 3 on the screen. Sorry, I didn't have it.
No, that's okay. I'll move it to this one. Sorry, Julia. I've been trying to avoid.
I think that covers it because it should still be located in Colorado.
Okay. Julia, are we ready to roll?
Yep, should be good.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so guys, we're going to be voting on the new language you see on the screen. So I'll read it out loud. The BPS rules should consider the appropriate level or amount of renewable energy generation that should count towards compliance, and that any renewable energy should meet the following conditions to receive credit. The AQCC should ensure the state only counts renewable energy where the building owner retains the REC or where a REC is retired on their behalf towards the greenhouse gas reductions required by the legislation, and should only count renewables such that the credit reflects the changing carbon intensity of Colorado's electric grid. And then the final bullet, the renewable energy is located in Colorado. So thank you, Katrina. Does this look right to you?
Hard to do live in real time. I'm not sure that it actually says that like renewables should count and then the AQCC should there's a bullet missing. My apologies. That's like all renewables should count. The AQCC then just needs to do the greenhouse gas accounting on the back end is what I was trying to capture.
Okay, continuing with live edits. Give us a quick moment to capture that correctly.
So this should say counts all renewable energy, period.
Mm-hmm.
Katrina, I'm not understanding. How would you count all renewable energy, but then not count it, not have the AQCC count it? So a building owner wouldn't know until after there was some AQCC process whether they were actually in compliance?
The building owner could count renewables towards their compliance. But then the state needs to not count those renewables towards reaching the goals of the legislation. So the greenhouse gas accounting on EUI will be done separate from it will be the basis for setting the EUI targets. Again, there would have to then be an estimate. How many building owners do renewables with RECs? How many will do them without? And the targets will need to be set so that building owners that do renewables without RECs don't hinder the ability of the whole program to reach the targets.
Sorry, Will, do you mind if I jump in?
No.
There's no way for the division to have that information. The utility customer is the customer of record and would need to know, and Joel, if you want to jump in here as somebody at the utilities, but the customer is the one on record. The customer would need to know if they retain the RECs based on what version of a utility program they are participating in. They would sign a contract, whether it's for a community solar garden, an off-site facility, or an on-site facility, and that contract should include a description of whether or not they retain the RECs. there's no way for the state to be able to gather that information. And I think that's the concern perhaps that Will might have been expressing and I'm now expressing. But
Well, the
Joel,
building,
am I wrong about that? Sorry.
No, you're correct. Where renewables are involved through subscription, that is reflected on the bill for the building owner, and we do allocate those kilowatt hours and/or RECs to that subscriber. But that is part of the issue that I want to raise with this is this doesn't really specify renewable energy. Is it on-site? Is it off-site? When we first voted on this, it was under the understanding that they could subscribe to community solar or to a wind farm PPA or something like that and have those RECs applied to their account, which could be passed from the utility to the building owner to the AQCC. But that really isn't reflected here, that offsite renewables count, just that they're located in the state of Colorado.
So to keep us on process here, Katrina, I'm not sure that in the changes that Julia's been making, are we getting closer to your recommendation? And then I think we need to
I
vote.
stopped making changes because we kept.
yeah, I don't think we're quite there.
Yeah.
My apologies. I think that it would be that the AQCC or the renewable energy located in Colorado on-site or off-site by a building owner should count. Maybe that's the first bullet. The second bullet is, the AQCC should do accounting to on-site or off-site. The AQCC should ensure the state only counts renewable energy where the building owner retains the RECs or where the REC is retired. And they could go ahead and discount renewables for the changing carbon intensity of the grid if they wanted towards the greenhouse gas goals of the legislation. So I think essentially this change is going to result in tighter EUI targets, more stringent EUI targets, because some building owners are going to submit renewables that that don't count towards the greenhouse gas goals of the legislation. But I don't think building owners know the difference between a community solar garden that doesn't come with RECs and a wind source subscription that does. And so I just think that if a building owner makes the effort to even build renewables through solar awards or not, they should get credit, but it should not then count towards the overall goal of the state, is what I was trying to say here.
Okay, that there's just a lot to capture live. So I think
And Keith and Will, I'm going to rely to you on these edits to provide that feedback from the state.
And I think from the state perspective, certainly the overall GHG accounting has to work, and there can't be double counting of emissions reductions. I understand this recommendation to be suggesting that happen on the back end, and that effectively all of the EUI targets be increased in order to allow renewables that don't actually contribute to GHG reductions from the building sector to contribute. I think that would be a difficult position for the agencies to support, but certainly that doesn't prohibit the task force from making such a recommendation.
Okay, so I think we're getting there with the first sentence here, and then I think this needs to end with, but the renewables can count towards compliance. They just cannot, they just need to be, they cannot, they shouldn't be double counted. And thank you guys for your patience again. I will say that 100 more times.
sorry, just to be clear, consistent with the recommendation, does there need to be something to indicate that an owner seeking this pathway would need to have their EUI target increased? I mean, otherwise, it seems to me, again, that we're setting up a program that doesn't actually meet what we're trying to achieve.
I guess I would say, I think building renewables is a significant effort and cost, and so it's not creating a big loophole, but the overall, but that would have to be estimated and built into the overall program design in some manner. And there's some risk in that, so.
Well, but I think it needs to be built into the individual type target. I mean, somewhere it needs to flow down so that we know that the buildings that are complying using this are actually contributing to the overall sector compliance. So those buildings need to have a bump in what their requirements are. Otherwise, we are building in a loophole.
Keith, I think your question is a really good one, and I am kind of feeling stuck on whether, you know, I think we need to vote on this proposed change, and if this passes, then we might need to go back and think about the target piece, not to like throw us in a whole loop, but I'm just trying to figure out how we kind of move this along. What are you thinking?
Well, first of all, I think we should capture Bill Green's comment in the chat, but you know, I think, you know, where I am on this is well, I'll stop there.
I don't think it's really compliant with the legislative language, but
I think as drafted, we were closer. I think this has moved in a different direction. But again, to Will's earlier point, if this is what the task force wants to recommend, it's up to the task force to make the recommendation.
Okay, let's vote. Katrina, do these bullets, they're a little bit messy right now, but do these bullets reflect what the changes you were saying? If they do, we will vote, and then we'll go through and try to incorporate everyone else's lobbying votes, not incorporate or vote on everyone's lobbying votes. Does this incorporate your thoughts, Katrina?
Yeah.
Okay. I will launch this lobbying vote poll.
Thank you.
We're waiting on 2 task force members.
All right, that is 15. And so thank you, Katrina, for that suggestion. That I think that we will not move forward with the suggested changes based on the task force vote. So per the process, that brings us back to this as the original option. And if anyone else had a lobby and vote change they'd like to recommend, I will pass it to you. And Joel, I see your hand up, so I will throw it to you next.
Yes, I would like to see that community solar still counts, so offsite generation be added back in there. My concern with the last version was that it said this does not count toward the greenhouse gas reductions of the legislation. Then the very next statement says it counts towards compliance with the BPS, and that did not make sense to me. It seemed contradictory.
Okay, thanks, Joel. And so your recommendation here is to add offsite renewable energy, specific mention of offsite to this recommendation language.
Correct. Yeah, and if we need to be more explicit, like community solar, green pricing, or things like that, I think that's okay.
And
they are
do you
subscribing to that.
A suggestion if and where that would live in this.
So would you like that in the second bullet? Perhaps the renewable energy is located in Colorado, either on site or off site for the building.
I think that version worked for me, yes.
Okay. either on-site or off-site. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Joel, for your thought. I think we will go ahead and do a vote on this change. Thanks, Crystal. All right, and that is 15 votes. We did get 11 task force members to vote this in, so we will move forward with that change. Katrina, I see your hand up. I'll give you another quick 30 seconds to share thoughts with the task force.
Yeah, I have just one other small proposed change. And again, my apologies, I can only speak to the Denver content and experience. I know task, that's why we're a whole task force, right? But in Denver, one of the renewable energy programs that comes with REX is the Renewable Connect month-to-month subscription. That subscription has unlimited availability and is significantly cheaper than improving the efficiency of a building. I would propose putting a 10% cap on month-to-month renewable energy subscriptions that have unlimited availability, because otherwise that will be the single biggest loophole. I think if a building owner, per my other amendment, builds their own solar, they should get credit with or without REX because they put in a big effort. But perhaps even more importantly, I think that we should have a 10% cap on subscriptions with unlimited availability for costs far below the cost of compliance.
Kim, you're muted.
Kim, you're muted.
As I'm calling you guys out for being muted, I was muted, my bad. Okay. Yeah, so do we want to, Julia, do you want to add a bullet to that slide that says, and we'll copy and paste that version. So there's a new one that just says that there's a 10% cap on renewable energy. I'm sorry, what did you call those programs, Katrina?
Month-to-month subscriptions with unlimited availability. I would welcome improved wording if there's a way to make that more general to utility programs elsewhere. That covers the specific Excel program that I think creates a loophole.
Okay. On month-to-month renewable energy subscriptions.
With unlimited availability.
With unlimited availability.
Let's pause on that wording and we'll just vote on that.
Okay, I'll just move this up so everyone can see it. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Katrina, for that final thought. Thank you, Crystal, for launching the poll, and we'll have task force members vote on this final, adding this final bullet here. And we're just missing one task force member vote. Okay. So unfortunately, that one also was voted down. So we will not move forward with that recommendation. But Katrina, I think, noted in the meeting minutes and in this video recording that does create a slight loophole for certain communities with that unlimited availability. So thank you for bringing up that point. Okay, any final lobby and vote? I'm not seeing any more hands, so I think we'll go ahead and move on to the 11th, or excuse me, no, I skipped one. Yes, I did. So another recommendation that partners with the last one we just looked at for renewable energy generation. This recommendation states the task force recommends the BPS rules should provide an allowance for systems in service before the adoption of final rules to be counted without REX unless the building owner has REX. And this piece is on page, again, 14 of the document for those following along. So Crystal, if you want to launch the poll, that'd be fantastic.
Stacy, to your question in the chat, I believe this basically means that if a building owner has a renewable energy system in place and doesn't own the RECs, then they will not be penalized by having it not count towards their compliance.
I will add in the wording that this is all the way up until the rules are published in June of 2023. In service before the adoption of the final BPS rules.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Crystal. Okay, we are creeping up to 15. A couple more task force members needed to vote. We're still missing 3, you guys. One more. Okay, the final task force member who has not voted, please try and get your vote in quickly. There it is. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to make you guys feel rushed. I hope I'm not doing that. So we did get 12 votes to include this as a proposal. So thank you everyone who voted. We will include this final recommendation without any changes. Moving on, and I'll move this into a nicer screen. To our 13th recommendation of the day, this recommendation is for the partial electrification secondary compliance pathway. It reads, the BPS rules should encourage building owners to replace fossil fuel equipment with efficient electric technologies and should provide partial credit towards BPS compliance for that electrification if it does not meet the 80% threshold for primary compliance. So we will launch a poll for this.
Can you say even if it does not meet?
I think that's a pretty easy word to add in. Crystal, do you have any conflicts with that?
No, we can add that. That's a missing word.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. Okay, here we go.
We're still waiting on 3 task force members.
All right, and one more. Okay, that is 15. Thank you all. 100% vote to approve this recommendation. So thank you. Feels good when we get those. Awesome. All righty, moving on to demand response and flexibility. So we had 2 recommendations in this category. And again, this is for our secondary compliance pathways. So the first recommendation is the task force recommends that AQCC develop rules that provide partial credit for participation in a utility demand response program or use of behind the meter technologies that reduce energy consumption for a building. So we will go ahead and vote on that. And Joel, I see your hand there. If we want to wait for the lobby and vote, or please throw your thoughts in the chat. All right, we've got 12 of the 15. All right, and that's 15 out of 15. Thanks, Crystal, if you want to share. So we did get 11 votes on that one. Joel, and I'm going to keep us moving along, but please absolutely share your thoughts in the chat, and Bill Green as well. Since that did reach consensus, I'm not going to do the lobby and vote for this one. Okay, moving along to the second recommendation for demand response and flexibility. The task force recommends the AQCC adopt rules that encourage demand flexibility integration in buildings, i.e. grid interactive efficient buildings, building technologies, building automation systems, grid interactive water heating, vehicle to grid, and electric or thermal storage, and credit these programs once an industry standardized methodology has been determined. For recommendation 15, please cast your votes.
Kim, I will also reiterate that after we take this vote, we have 10 recommendations left with about 3 minutes left per recommendation. And we're still waiting on about 3 people to vote on this one.
And I just want to bring up some thoughts from the chat. Joel, I appreciate your thought behind the meter for non-fossil fuel technologies to close the loophole. We'll absolutely add that to the additional considerations outside of the recommendation language. And Christine, I think we can do the same with that month-to-month availability piece within the final text of the report. So know that we're capturing all of these, and I'm trying to keep up. All right, 2 more task force members waiting to vote on this one.
My vote disappeared. If you're waiting on me, I don't see it anymore.
I will close the poll, and if anyone is missing, I will follow up via email.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you guys. And we did get that one passed. So we will move forward with both of these recommendations. Thanks. All right. And we're going to move on to our compliance adjustment options. So the recommendation for compliance adjustment, the first one we have here, and this is down on page 17 of our document. The final BPS rules should allow compliance adjustment options for building owners and require a building owner seeking an adjustment option to apply to and provide documentation to CEO detailing why an adjustment is needed and a plan showing how the building owner will meet the adjusted compliance option. Crystal, so if you want to start the poll. Thank you. Okay. We're almost there. One more task force member. There it is. Awesome. Thank you all so much. So 100% clearance on that recommendation. So that one is good to go, and we will continue on. So for 17 and 18, these are, again, a compliant adjustment recommendations. So number 17, we will vote on first. The recommendation states allows building owners to request an adjusted timeline to achieve compliance with their property type EUI target. And we can actually, before we vote, let me just make the adjustment. Thank you, Julia. You're already on it. Okay.
Or should I say BPS target?
Okay. So the recommendation is allows building owners to request an adjusted timeline to achieve compliance with their property type EUI target.
Should it say BPS target, as Christine noted?
I don't think that's a voted change that we've made. I think property type EUI target is the consistent language we've been using throughout.
I think we'll have to do a lobbying vote based on what we voted in earlier. That's why we would need to possibly have an A and B here, or Keith, what are your thoughts on this? Can we change it now or do it via lobbying vote? Should this be BPS compliance?
I think the way that I'm interpreting this, if you don't mind me jumping in, is that this is an option for building owners who don't want to electrify 80% and need an adjustment, a timeline adjustment for their EUI target. So I don't think that this statement would change based on the lobby and vote from earlier in the meeting.
Sorry, I'm actually inclined to go the other way, to say that we can make it broad, and it's ultimately up to a demonstration to us, you know, of the need for compliance. So if the task force would like to take it broad, then I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, apologies to all the task force members who just voted because I launched the poll. Let's make this broad, like Keith said. So if Julia, you could edit the slide and then we'll re-vote on each of them. We can make both of them broad, so it applies to the property type target as well as electrification. I would just say timeline to achieve compliance with the BPS, period. So actually pretty much what Christine said. Target may be different. We'll come back to target. Let's revote on timeline. I think this one is the easiest one to make broad. So I'll relaunch the vote.
Okay, almost there. Couple more folks, get your votes in. All right, and that's it. Wonderful. So recommendation 17 has been approved, and we'll just note that Julia and Claire that did change from the final PDF. Okay, and moving on to number 18 here for adjusted target, the recommendation language is allows building owners to request a different property type EUI target.
So I'll add in that I think this does specifically pertain to property type targets. And I think if we need an adjustment for electrification, that we would add another recommendation specifically for that. So let's vote on this. This will pertain to property type and site UI. But if task force members can start putting in the chat a recommendation, if we need a specific recommendation for the electrification, 80% or partial, while we're voting on this one.
Okay, thanks, Crystal. So we'll start with the vote on 18. So we'll have that poll launched. Thank you. Okay, and a couple more folks could get your votes in, please. Okay, that is 15. So thanks. And again, thanks for all you guys dropping notes in the chat. We are capturing those. So this recommendation does pass, which is fantastic. So we will continue on to our penalties for noncompliance proposal. And so there were 2 penalty for noncompliance proposals with the BPS, as you guys might recall from one of our most recent meetings. The first, number 19, we will vote on first. And this is to help individual building owners meet their property type. Man, this is everywhere. So let me just stop it really quick. We'll get rid of specific. In these 2 instances, make sure it's not there. Okay, great. To help individual building owners meet their property type EUI targets and for the covered buildings to meet the greenhouse gas emission targets for the sector, the final rules should establish civil penalties for building owners who fail to submit a benchmarking report and civil penalties for building owners whose buildings fail to meet the property type EUI target. Crystal, if you can launch the vote, that would be fantastic. Oh, and I'm sorry, we did launch the vote, and Christine again said we should change to buildings who fail to meet the.
I think it's the last couple words of this
Yes.
sentence.
Yeah.
I'll end the poll now. So we
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that one. Thanks, Christine, for catching that.
And on the second line.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Going back in. So the final, as it reads, to help individual building owners meet the BPS targets and for covered buildings to meet the greenhouse gas emission targets for the sector, the final rule should establish civil penalties for building owners who fail to submit a benchmarking report and civil penalties for building owners whose buildings fail to meet the BPS target. And we will launch a poll for that one. Thank you, Crystal. All right, just looking for a couple more votes. Task force members, if you're running into a vote issue, please let us know. Otherwise, please cast your ballot. Okay. We did get 12 out of 14 votes. We did miss a task force member vote. So if you are not sure if your vote got in or you didn't vote on this one, please drop it in the chat for us. But this one passes, so we will continue on. Recommendation 20 is going to be our next vote. So the final BPS rules should include a civil penalty structure that sets penalties somewhat above the cost of compliance and in proportion to the required EUI reduction not achieved. And I guess for this one, I know, Crystal, we just launched the poll, and I'm sorry, I don't know if we need to make those same edits to that last piece of the statement.
I think this one we can go through lobby and vote structure because this isn't referring to any of the specific targets.
Okay. Okay. Right. We just have a couple more votes coming in. All right, so that's 15. We did not get consensus on this one. And so we will do a lobby and vote. So please raise your hand if you would like to lobby for changes. We will keep it, we will continue to keep it tight because we're getting close on time. So if you'd like to lobby for change, raise your hand. Katrina, I see you first. So we will go ahead and start with you.
Great, I would just change the the required EUI reduction to the required energy savings, because we don't want the same penalty for a small building and a large building.
Okay. So the suggested change is in proportion to the required energy savings not achieved. Awesome. I will exit out. Okay. Thanks, Katrina. So we'll launch the poll to see if folks would like to vote in Katrina's change. And we're just
We are again waiting on one task force member.
Okay, and there it is. Wonderful. All right, so we did get 11 folks voted yes for that, so that change will stay. And so I'll keep this screen up as the one that we will be lobbying to change next. And Nori, I see you're up next for our lobby and vote, so I will pass it to you. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. And I accidentally voted no, but I did like that change that she suggested. So
okay.
I'm sorry for that. I just do not agree with the above the cost of compliance, because I feel like the penalties could be pretty high, like well over $10,000, and that the civil penalty structure that's already in place for some of the other items should just be a flat fee rather than above the cost of compliance. I feel like that's burdensome upon low-income building owners and households.
Okay, thanks, Nori. So how would you like to change that wording here to capture that?
I think just delete above the cost of compliance.
So a penalty structure that sets penalties in proportion to the required energy savings that are not achieved.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The next slide, it's reflected.
Perfect. All right, so for the second lobby and vote, we will vote on that change suggested by Nori. And Crystal, when you're ready, feel free to launch the poll.
Thank you for folks who are putting some comments in the chat.
We're waiting on one task force member.
Okay, so unfortunately that suggested change did not pass, but as we will be doing with all of these thoughts in the chat, we can throw those into some of the additional considerations for that live outside of the final recommendation. So we did not accept this. This is our final as of right now recommendation. Are there any other lobbied changes that folks would like to make? Okay, fantastic. Moving on along. So next we're gonna have votes on our, we have just 4 votes left. We're doing really great. So thanks everyone for sticking with us. We're gonna vote on programs to support compliance, equity, and workforce. And then we have our 2030 and beyond proposal to vote on as well. So number 21, this is a recommendation for programs to support compliance. The task force recommends that the state of Colorado work with various organizations to help develop programs that will support building owners in complying with the BPS requirements. These programs will provide resources, information, and tools to help building owners meet the requirements of the BPS. And I, again, am being negligent on where we are in the actual document. So this piece starts down on page 20 for those following along in the PDF. All right, and Crystal, thanks for launching the poll. All right, and there we have it. All 15 votes are in. So that one passes with flying colors. Thank you all. We will move on to our programs and considerations for workforce. This recommendation reads, the task force recommends that the state of Colorado work with various organizations in the state to develop and support programs to ensure that there is a trained and prepared workforce to support the building improvements that will be required under the BPS. And we will go ahead and launch the poll. And we're just still waiting on one more. If you're having trouble, no worries. But that one did pass 14 out of 14. So if you didn't get to vote on that one, please throw it in the chat. But that one does pass the 2/3 consensus. All right. And the final programs and considerations piece, and this one's on equity. So the recommendation we have here is the task force recommends the state of Colorado work with various organizations in the state to help develop programs that will advance equitable outcomes through the implementation of the BPS. These programs to support equity will ensure that all Coloradans impacted by the BPS are not unduly burdened and are able to comply with the BPS requirements fully. And we'll go ahead and launch the poll. And Karen, I see your hand. If you don't mind throwing your note in the chat, if it's something we need to add to our additional considerations. And if we go to a lobby and vote, I'll certainly call on you for sure. Okay. That one we must have missed a task force member as well. So as those polls come up, please make sure you're voting, and Chris, I'll let you know when we get to 15. Okay, that one passes. So we are good to go. And Karen, thanks for throwing your comment in the chat. So this takes us to our final recommendation to vote on. the BPS beyond 2030. And this recommendation states the task force recommends the AQCC consider convening a new task force by June 1st, 2028 to help advise, solicit public input on and make recommendations for building performance standards for the period 2030 to 2050 that align with Colorado's 2050 greenhouse gas reduction targets. All right, and we will launch the poll. All right, and that is 15 votes, 15 out of 15 for a yes on that. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you all for working through that process. We know that it was clunky at times, but we appreciate you guys sticking with us and getting through to the end. And again, we weren't reading what you guys were sharing in the chat out loud, but we are tracking all of that and appreciate all the thoughtfulness and the comments that have been dropped in the chat. So with that, Crystal, I wanted to pause. Do we want to look at the chart since we have a couple of extra minutes? Okay, great. So you guys saw a preview of this earlier. We have updated the chart to help explain the pathways for BPS compliance, and just wanted to kind of open source for a few minutes here since we have some extra time, what your thoughts are on this structure, if you like it, and if you have any suggested changes. And we're not going to live edit this today because that would get really messy, but we will take your changes or thoughts into consideration. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute if you have any thoughts.
And just to reiterate, this was responding to some feedback on the old graph and trying to make it clearer for the public and for the air division, as well as building owners. This may not be the final thing we use in the program, but this would be included in the recommendation document. So that's why we want to show it to you today and get your feedback before we include this in the document.
Thanks, Crystal. And Stacy, I see your hand, so I'll pass it to you.
Yep, I just wanted to ask if energy efficiency could be listed on the top, because I always want energy efficiency to be first. That's all.
Stacy, I think that's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you. Kara, to you.
Yep, great suggestion. I might propose we call this like BPS compliance structure, since it covers more than just pathways. And then also to our conversation earlier, maybe breaking out the purple into 2 boxes or somehow indicating that it's nested within each of the primary compliance pathways, that they're a little bit different. So we may need another layer off to the right, or I don't know, some boxes stemming off of each primary compliance pathway. Thank you. I love these simple diagrams to help people understand. I appreciate the work going into these.
Kara, apologies. Can you just restate what you wanted to see? Another purple box for?
I think per our discussion earlier, the purple row is no longer correct. It needs to go below the green. And
this is going to be messy, but
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it needs, you understand what I'm.
I see what you're saying. The metric for each of these would be different. So we need a little box to move there. Okay.
Yep.
Great. All right. Thank you. Both wonderful suggestions. Any other thoughts on this diagram? Okay. Well,
one other, sorry,
sure,
just to the GHG point, do we want to emphasize like the purpose of this is to reduce GHGs? Something at the top just to reiterate that primary target.
I think that's something that the state tried to include throughout the document. If you have a suggestion of where to put it, we can put that in, but we kind of kept this to the metric and the pathways themselves. So if you have a suggestion or wording of where to put it, that'd be helpful.
We'll look at it. I don't think that that's impossible to do. So we'll take a look at it.
Awesome. Okay. Any final thoughts? Christine, do you mind explaining your comment in the chat? I'm not sure that I get it. What you're suggesting.
Rather than another little blue line going off of energy efficiency saying site EUI and property type targets, maybe you put it in parentheses in that same box. I don't know that that would fit, but it would say demonstrated through site EUI and property type targets.
Okay, cool. Just a different way to think about formatting. We can play around
Formatting.
and which one's the cleanest look.
Yeah, Kim, you might refresh your screen just because Crystal did move some stuff around just so folks can see what that looks like now.
Thank you, Crystal. I didn't know we were live editing this one.
It's okay. You don't need to necessarily refresh, but we can
well,
also.
Here's what it's looking like. So we can keep working on that.
Not my proudest work, so don't judge me on it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I am not hearing any other thoughts on this visual, so I'm glad you guys like it better. We think it helps just keep things very clean and very have sort of a very streamlined visual that can hopefully support folks' understanding of all of these complicated pathways. So with that, I am going to pass it to our CEO team to wrap us up and let us know what's happening as far as next steps.
Kim, you can actually go to the next slide. But as you all know, this is our final meeting. And so we didn't want to just vote and leave you guys all hanging. We wanted to wrap up this process very nicely and just provide some background on the next steps that CEO is aware of. So CEO's next steps after today, number one, we'll be following up with everyone who wasn't able to vote on the call today or who wasn't in attendance and did not vote. We will tally all of those votes. We will include the updated recommendations into the document as well. CEO will also do some formatting of the document to make sure it meets our standards, but essentially we will work on that. And then October 1st, we will pass the recommendations over to the governor, the General Assembly, and the Air Quality Control Commission, or AQCC, as you all know them. We will also post these recommendations to our website. I've linked it here. We'll make sure these slides and the meeting notes have all these links very clearly in them. But our website will have a section describing the recommendations and noting that the task force process has now completed. We'll also publish a press release notifying the public that this process has also finished as well, and that is passed on to the AQCC. So those are the next steps directly for CEO. And Kim, if you could go to the next slide. So we used to have a very detailed timeline way back when, but essentially from once we pass these recommendations off to the Air Division and the AQCC, they have from now until June 1st of 2023 to promulgate and publish the final BPS rules. So obviously there's a lot of steps in between. And so we've kind of tried to break down these steps to make them as broad as possible. And I will let Keith, Will, and Jackie chime in if I speak on anything, because this process is a little bit convoluted. But between October and January, actually starting in October, the AQCC will have a hearing or monthly meeting. And so CEO will be present at that meeting just to provide an update, to show them and talk to them that this process has ended, the recommendations are now final from you all, and that we have now passed them on to the division, just to kind of alert them to that. And then on behalf of the AQCC, the Air Pollution and Control Division, we just refer to them as the Air Division, will begin reviewing your recommendations and developing the proposed building performance standards rules, which the AQCC will consider in the next couple months. So that process will start in October. In January, there will be a proposed rulemaking request for the building performance standards rules. And so the Air Commission, or the Air Division, and the AQCC host monthly meetings. And you'll see the schedule on the bullet here. Again, we'll share this afterwards, and as well as the link to their calendar. But they'll have a proposed rulemaking request, and they will actually. Kim, can you go to the next slide? I'll jump back and forth a bit. But in January, they'll have that proposed rulemaking request. And when they do this, they will present multiple different items. So they will include their proposed rules, which will include all the detailed rules, including the targets. They'll also have a statement of basis and purpose, essentially, which is just the reasoning and justification for these proposed rules, as well as as well as an economic impact analysis, which essentially will be the air division exploring how much this could potentially cost for building owners. So when they make this request, all those documents will also be publicly available as well. And then the actual hearing for these proposed rules will be in May. And so there'll be a notice published on the AQCC website. Again, we'll make sure these links are clear afterwards. And that will set deadlines for when the final hearing will be, as well as deadlines for petitions to the rulemaking. So we've included a lot of bullets here, but essentially those are the high level next steps for the AQCC. And then, so they have the proposed rulemaking request in January. The hearings will take place in May. And then again, by June 1st of 2023, that hearing has to be finished and those rules have to be final and published. I'll refer to Keith and Will and Jackie. If there's any more detail you'd like to add in, because I kind of did a very high level there. And we'll also pause for questions as well. But
this is Jackie Colicchio from the Attorney General's office. Crystal, thank you so much for giving that overview on the next steps and the AQCC's process. All I wanted to note was when you see these large gaps like October to January, please know that the air division, the staff, the air pollution, the Air Quality Control Commission is doing stakeholder outreach. So they have a statutory obligation to this outreach, be it taking public comment, or engaging interested stakeholders. So that's where you see these gaps, is that this process is not like a closed door process. There's just gaps for stakeholder engagement as they go along. And their notice period from January to May is statutorily required. So that's why you have a January request, and then it goes to a May hearing. So that's all I wanted to clarify here at this point. And I will let Keith and Will speak more to this if they have anything else to add.
Thank you, Crystal and Jackie. No, I don't have anything to add. Nice job with an overview of the process.
And so then we have a question from a task force member. Do you have any thoughts on how the AQCC might shift or change our recommended direction? How can the task force be helpful to the process?
Jackie, I'll actually let you take this since you have experience there.
Sure. So the thing is, this is going to go first to their expert staff at the Air Pollution Control Division, as Crystal was saying. The recommendations go to everyone. They will turn these into rules as they see fit to meet the statutory targets for the reductions that are required. If you can always go to their website, there are ways to file public comment. There are ways to engage in the stakeholder process going forward. But CEO will also be available to coordinate with the division and help clarify anything going forward, given that CEO has overseen this task force process and has these very detailed and extensive notes, thanks to Crystal, Kimberly, Julia. So we should be able to help fill in some gaps, but there are ways to get involved, and that's why we've tried to provide the links here for information for the AQCC process.
Thanks, Jackie. And Keith, I saw you unmuted. Do you have anything to add to that? Okay, awesome. Any other questions on this process or next steps as Crystal outlined them, Crystal and Jackie outlined them? Karen, yes, you can all hang out with each other outside of your meetings being recorded starting after today. Yay, maybe we'll have a happy hour sometime. Okay.
I was going to say that transitions into our thank you, but I do suggest all of you meet in person and have a happy hour and celebrate all the hard work you did in this process.
Wonderful. Well, if there are any questions that linger, please know that you can always reach Crystal or our Lotus team, and we're happy to answer those. And so I mean, I'll just start and pass it to the CEO to wrap it up. We just want to say the biggest heartfelt thank you to all of you for your time, your energy, your thoughts, your thoughtfulness. It has been a really fun process working with each of you, and we've been very grateful to help support the process and look forward to seeing these rules become realized. So thank you from the Lotus team, and CEO, I'll let you say your own thank yous.
I'll chime in quickly and then I'll pass it to Keith and especially Will too if he's still on the call. But thank you all for lending your expertise and for applying to even be a part of this process. It wasn't an easy process, and I know it's been a hard way of coming here. So thank you for really working with us and working with the state, and hearing us out on the background on this statute. And like we've said before, the goal is those emission reductions, and so we will be the go-between between you and the air division. And it's very exciting policy overall to work on to hopefully meet those reductions. So just thank you again for being a part of it. I'll pass it to Keith and Will.
Thanks, Crystal. I'm not sure that Will is still with us. I'll give him one more second. I think he had to drop off for another call. I will echo the thanks from Crystal and the Lotus team for all of the hard work and the effort that has been put in by all of the task force members. This was the first time that we have done something like this to create policy. I think it sets a really great model for a way to move forward with constructive collaboration that helps advance the state's policy goals by bringing together a lot of different interests and expertise. And so thank you for that. And thank you for the time that you all put into this, not just in the meetings, but outside to engage with the work that we had to do over the last several months. And, we will carry this forward by October 1st, present it where it needs to be presented. And then, of course, the division will pick it up from there and develop the rules. So thank you, everyone.
And I'll just clarify, because Kathy had a question. These recommendations will be posted on our website October 1st. So that will be available to the public to find those recommendations, but you can also share those recommendations at that point if you want to as well.
All right.
Now you don't need to deal with any of our Zoom polls, so congratulations.
We are all wrapped up here. So thank you all again. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. And hopefully we'll all see each other again soon.
Great. Can the Lotus and CEO team stay on at the end for just a couple minutes?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.